Welcome to another nominee interview for Epoch 7. Today with me, I have Lucius. What is up, my man?
Hello. Good to be back.
Yo, it's good to have you back, man. I'm excited for this conversation and keen to see where you go with these questions. So let's not waste any time. I'm going to jump straight into the questions and let's start knocking these out. The first question I have for you is a question, and it's a topic that just doesn't go away ever. I've been doing these 3 epochs now, and it keeps coming back. The topic around council pay. What are your thoughts on the current structure of the council pay, the current compensation? And what do you think about the IIP that's just passed, changing the council pay from stablecoins back into ILV?
Yeah, so as you said, this has been a long-standing debate. I've chimed in a few times in the past and also recently. I think it's one of those things where I fall a bit in the middle. I think that some adjustments is necessary, but it's also related to one of the later questions where it needs to be lined up a bit with the expectations, right? And this is always the approach I've taken. And if you've read also Daraji's comments, I very closely align. He explains things very well, but it's a matter of balancing pay with responsibilities and just making sure that there's mechanisms for accountability. And then, in terms of the recent IIP, this is good. Danny has his job as CFO for a reason. So it's good that we listen to him and that we are lining up these things between the team and the council to be working well together, right?
Yeah. Awesome. So I want to dig in a little bit deeper, and I know we're going to touch on that a bit later in the questions as well. But you mentioned something about the expectations and the duties of the council member and the pay. You've been in council meetings internally for quite some time as well. Do you think the current compensation fits and matches the current output of the council? Or is this something that you would change higher or lower? And I know it's a bit of a loaded question, but I've been asking everyone this, so it's not just you.
Yeah, definitely a loaded question, right? Anytime you're talking about somebody's salary or what they're worth,
Yeah.
right? In that sense. So I would just change the perspective a little bit, because we could also say that some council members are doing a lot more than others, at least from
Yeah.
what I see. I'm not attending
Yeah.
council meetings at this point, but I was
Yeah.
pretty regularly for a while. And also I'm in the governance V2 development group. So,
Yes.
I'm aware that there's a few people who've been a bit more active there and supporting some of the developments for the protocol in terms of this proposal and some other things. So I would say it really depends, who are you
Okay.
talking about? And then what is a reasonable level of expectation? And we'll come into that, I think, in one of the later questions, because
Yeah.
part of this ties into governance V2, which
Yeah.
I helped to kick off the governance V2 developments. I was taking it from Kieran and saying, Kieran, come on, give us some of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because we've been with that. So was getting him to pull it out of his mind and into a doc, right? And then I got a hold of this doc and was reading through, and then brought sent to Rich, and so that we we're looking at it together.
Yeah.
And also was helping to get Rich. I helped to encourage him to step up and take ownership, right? Which Kieran
Yeah.
was initially a little reluctant about, because he's like, if you guys take it, you have to do something with it. Okay, right, I get it. But thankfully,
Yeah.
I had a lot of faith in Rich and his ability to push these things. So I really encouraged him to take that, which he did, and then he's put together this group to really help develop it. And so then it has become something way better than it could have been, right? So
Yeah.
this is kind of
No,
how the process
absolutely.
unfolded.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I love that answer. It's a very it's a very nice way to kind of skirt around it, but well played. Um,
Yeah.
the next question is one that's been asked by the community. It's been one that's not just been asked once or twice, but multiple times from multiple community members. So that's why it's on this list. If you are elected, would you be willing to forfeit your council pay for the good of the Illuvium runway?
Yeah, so this is something that's also come up a lot in the conversation, obviously very related to, in terms of balancing how much it is. So if if we're talking the whole cut or a partial cut,
Yeah.
any of these kind of things. Personally, I understand. I'm in the camp that I think that as the protocol is considering making exceptions, with like the potential IIP for Illuvatars, some of this cuts in other places. So I think that council, it sounds fair for them to also take some with that. But again, I think this is something that's already being addressed pretty well, even numerically, with governance v2. So I'll kind of push that there. But I do think it's a fair thing. And then in terms of the actual position, part of the governance v2 rollout, it makes sense for the transition to happen that way, where maybe you lose your seat. Of course, I would be okay with that because I agree with this mechanism. While it might impact a certain individual or maybe myself if I were elected, but it does seem like the most functional way to unroll this governance v2. So whether that happens in the middle of an epoch or near the end and you're able to time it, then great. But if you need to do it beforehand and do another re-election period, this may mean that the council seats shuffle around a bit. But this is just kind of what's best for the protocol.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's something that I've been saying in all of these interviews as well. I'm really excited for when the public gets to see governance v2. We've
I know.
put a lot of work into it, going back and forth.
Been talking about it for months, but it's just literally words on a. You can't tell anybody the details because it's like someone was saying, it's a 9-page doc. So if you're trying to talk about little details without the whole concept, you're missing. So really happy that if that'll get pushed out soon.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Exactly.
All right. So the next question here is: in the last 6 months, how have you specifically contributed to Illuvium, and why do you think that this contribution has been beneficial for the DAO?
Yeah, so I'll go a bit in reverse in terms of that, and just to say that I have a background with project management and community management, writing and psychology. So there's a few different things, in terms of when I'm working on a project, what I can bring. Currently I'm working at the ﷺards DAO as an operations manager, and I've helped to do a lot of improvement proposals for their protocol. So in terms of governance, right, this is a big offering, and it's actually what got me to work with Illuvium in the first place is that. But specifically for Illuvium, once I had stepped in, was working with the team there. Of course, was always very active in governance and community discussions. That was part of my role in that sense as well. Collaborating directly with Kieran and Rich, a lot of members of the Illuvium team. And so part of what I was specifically working on is, first, when I came in, I was helping to develop the core structure for the customer service department and its roadmap on how to expand and unfold, which Chris has taken and done an amazing job with. I've written various high-level articles, including many Medium publications, like the land sale article, basically like a 20-page land sale document, right? Other things like how-tos, partnership articles, any of these kind of publications as I was working in marketing. Also helped to write and proof the copy for the Illuvium website, FAQ, landing pages, any of this stuff that needed to be updated or published. Also helped to develop the majority of the Illuvium infographics, working alongside the artists, lining out the design and the UIs and the copyright or the copy for those. Also established things like a technical solution that was required for like the Illuvitar reveals and the merging animations, just because we wanted something cool. And so pulling things from other protocols and how we can execute and passing that to the team. So for me, it was any areas I could contribute. So this was some of these interesting things. And then, as I mentioned, some of the governance v2 early works, really getting that off the ground. And then just various other improvements, to marketing, workflows, collaborations, all of these different kind of things, right? My skill set, I'm a bit of a solution architect. So if there's an issue or a problem or a way to improve something, is starting to draft or formalize ways that takes into account the team member needs and feedback and the community and the protocol's needs, and trying to find solutions that really bridge the gap between these elements, right?
Yeah. I'm not going to lie. I'm supposed to be objective during these interviews, but that was by far the longest list of contributions that I've had doing these interviews. So well played. Yeah. Well played.
Cheers.
All right.
I had a bit of an advantage being, having worked as a core contributor. So, okay.
Yeah. No, nice. I mean, use it to your advantage, right? All right. The next question I have for you is, and you've kind of already touched on it, but if you can go deeper, go for it. what's the unique value proposition that you think that you can offer that separates you from the other nominees? You have mentioned something already, but if you want to go a bit deeper, go for it.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, really, it's about using these relationships. Having worked and still, Kieran is an advisor to our protocol, so still having regular engagement with him. Rich is become a good friend, so constantly engaging with him about whether it's governance or mods or catching up. I have good relationships with a lot of the other Illuvium team, so I'm able to kind of reach out and bridge these connections. And this is one of the things that I would want to utilize a lot as a council member if I were elected, is to help with these relationships between the community, the council, and the team, and help to serve as a bridge, right, for these things. Because this is the really key component when you want to run a successful protocol, is you want to have alignment between these different things, and to having people to help serve, and kind of bridge the gap again between these different things. If somebody has a differing opinion, but what's a way to find a middle ground, or what's a way to connect you with the person who you can have a conversation with to have an even better solution or understanding of something, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it would be a lot of just helping to be that bridge, I think is something that can really set apart.
No, absolutely, absolutely. All right, cool. And this is the thing that we've been talking about for pretty much the whole discussion now. But governance V2, let's actually dive in deep into this topic here. So, like we've mentioned a few times now, we are closer than ever to governance V2 being dropped, or at least proposed, I should say.
Yeah.
With that being said, what do you think are major flaws, or what's the biggest flaw from governance V1? And if it were up to you solely, how would you amend that in governance V2?
Well, let's say that governance V1 is just very limited in functionality, right? That's its biggest flaw, is its limitations, which actually served the protocol very well in the early days, because you want a simple way to make decisions that people support, right? So it did serve, but it's literally a V1 and was only meant as a V1, right?
Yeah.
So its strengths are also its limitations, right? So, and then in governance V2, I've been looking at this literally since day one. It came, well, as soon as Kieran put it in a doc, right? And I never would have had the approach to do it myself, right? Because I know the strength of having some of the brilliant minds do it. So actually, I fully support the way that it's unfolded. I think that Rich has done a great job as a product owner to really step up and bring in people to have really difficult conversations, and to really explore not only functional ways to accomplish what the protocol and the team wants, but really listening to past community feedback. I won't go into specific details just because they haven't published these things publicly yet. But in terms of even like council pay and responsibilities, this is addressed, right? And a lot of the numbers and variables that were selected for the proposal, this basically came from the community. If you look at the conversations that are happening now, people are basically asking for the same things that are already included in this proposal, right? So this is great. This means that the community has actually been listened to, and that governance proposals are being developed in the way that is actually taking this feedback from all different parties involved and really including it together, right? So this is really the biggest strength of this. And again, it's a bit of a complex thing because you're putting many different layers on it. But part of the benefit of the governance V2 is that it allows for a bit more of a decentralized approach in terms of, having a bit more community members involved. Sorry, I think my camera might be
webcam.
But it allows community members to be involved. And it also is allowing, to still have these different sub-councils for discussions. It's also having polling mechanisms to further gauge sentiment and things. So all in all, it's a really well-designed proposal. So, look forward to seeing and hearing community feedback.
Yeah, and I think, again, we can't go too deep into it, like you said, because it's not public yet. But I think once it does get out, it's going to incentivize a lot more people to get involved in governance. I think they're going to feel like they have a lot more opportunity to get involved, which I'm excited to see, just because we can get some fresh faces in there and fresh ideas and more, just more of a discussion, really. So the next question you've kind of already answered at the start, but again, I'll throw it to you because I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't give you all the same questions as everyone else. So if governance V2 is approved during your term, let's say you are elected and it is approved, would you be willing to cut your term short to conduct a new election to transition into V2, potentially risking your position? You kind of answered that before, but like I said, I do need to ask you that question formally.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, personally, I support it. In terms of that, if it goes that way, then that's just the way of things. Of course, everyone wants to retain their seat, but this is the best mechanism, I think, for it to go. So, I definitely support that.
Yeah, that's kind of that was definitely a layup question. All right, so this next question is meant to be the last question, but it's now the second last question. Just based on the conversations that we're having now in the community, I've added one more question into this list that I haven't actually sent you. So this is going to be the last question is going to be off the cuff. Yeah, and it is going to be slightly difficult. It's not going to be a layup. It's not going to be that easy. But so the question I have for you now is, again, we've talked about the council members' expectations, duties, and what we really expect of them. So if you had to write a formal IIP to clarify what the council members' duties are, what the time commitments are, what would be included in that IIP? What do you expect from a council member in that role?
Yeah, I mean, you just need to further define really what are the expectations in terms of basically some what is a measurable expectation, right? At the moment, there's nothing put down in terms of like how many hours you need to contribute or certain mechanisms for accountability. However, again, we come back to governance V2. They've kind of tried to push everything into it. But this is, again, one of the things that it addresses very specifically and really lays out the roles for people of specific councils and then also specific sub-councils, right? So I wouldn't go on to say, again, specifics, but, these are the kind of things that you want a governance and a council to be addressing. And this is some of what's being addressed through that proposal. So I wouldn't specifically encourage an individual IIP for that at the moment. I would say possibly bring it into the discussion in terms of the governance V2. But I do agree it's very important. And it's a conversation that's come up repeatedly in the past, also related to pay, which is fair. So I do think it's something that should and will be addressed.
Yeah. This question about IIP is a theoretical question about the IIP, more to focus the idea on what the expectations are. So
I feel like I should be like zooming in and out like
just
a ghost,
moving. Every time the questions go hard, you just disappear.
Right, just dip out.
It's like, I'm out. Yo, handlers. But no. So again, you kind of mentioned about the hours, right? And I know this hasn't actually been really dealt with in governance V2, even the hours, the time commitment that's expected of them. Based on what your experience is and what you've seen internally, what is the time commitment that you think is required for the council members to do an adequate job?
Yeah, in that regard, it depends, because we would say up to this point, with governance V1 and Kieran needing to stay as a mainstay within the council to help transition some of this fluid information and flows of things, which again, this is something that they're working to improve. So there was a bit of a limited opportunity for council to be involved. So again, I'm speaking without criticism of any previous council members, and also with kind of governance V2 in mind, right? With that in mind, we're kind of looking at probably be something like 5-10 hours a week, in order to be actively engaged, involved, really kind of following through, making sure communications or responsibilities are happening. Right? We're not looking at a full-time job, and some people will do more efforts than others, especially given certain skill sets or ability to have free time. And also, it's important to remember that some people's contribution is also maybe a bit more valuable, we could say. In the past, if we're looking at someone like Santiago, right, his contribution has always been very valuable to the protocol, even given his limited time, right? So that's one example, but I do understand that people would like to standardize these things a bit moving forward, which again, I support. So we would say in governance V2, probably 5 to 10 hours a week,
Cool. All right, 6. So this is the last question that has kind of just popped up in the community recently. And that is the conversation about potentially turning the Illuvitar's revenue in and stop that from being distributed, and instead moving that into the treasury for the runway. I'm going to leave it open-ended like that. What are your thoughts on that? Where do you stand on that? I'll leave it up to you.
Well, my first question to Kieran, when he commented in the thread, is to say, would this potentially reduce the need for a fundraise in poor market conditions? And basically the answer is yes, if it raises enough, right? So obviously we can't have a clear answer. We don't know how the sale will go. But from that perspective, I would support it, right? In terms of if we're looking at what's good for the DAO and the protocol long term, right? This is where we need to look at, even considering from an investor standpoint, if you remove yourself from the very short term, if you're looking long term and you're considering using a good amount of portion of the treasury for a fundraise in very terrible market conditions, that it's difficult to raise funds, meaning you need to discount even heavier, right? This has been a pain point for the protocol. And so if there's a potential to lessen that burden or to kind of strengthen also investor sentiment through having additional funds being raised with the Illuviatars, for me, I would support it. Given also the fact that the Illuviatars was a product that came out after the fact, and so it's kind of a bit of a bonus to the protocol regardless. And I would say that they should stipulate that it should be like this once, right? This once that this is happening, or it should just be very clear ahead of time, also in advance, before the sale, so that people are knowing. On a side note, I do not support the removal of SILV2.
Yes.
I think that that's been promised. I think that the community has expressed pretty clearly that, and also the governance has said, we're not going to include that in the proposal. But just to say, SILV2 should be usable, in my opinion. I think many others agree. But in terms of the rev disc going to the treasury, I would support that either in a partial or full capacity for this first Illuvitar sale, given the circumstances. And this provides the DAO valuable runway to ensure that they're maintaining critical team members, operations, development, so that these things don't slow down, right? So if we're looking at from this perspective, this is some of the primary reasons for support.
Yeah, no, understood, and well kind of presented as well. All right, yo, Lucius, I appreciate you coming on and answering these questions, man. Is there anything you kind of want to say before we close this out? Any last words before we end this?
Thanks for bearing with me and my appearing and disappearing act, right? Like, we just want to connect with you. So thanks for listening, and if I'm elected to council, I'll be present for the community as in the past, open to discussion. And, I want what's best for the DAO, whether that's me or someone else sitting in the council seat. But personally, I think I could do a great job.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, yo, Lucius, appreciate you, man. Appreciate your time. And for everyone else that's watching as well, thank you guys for watching. Make sure you follow this channel because there is going to be a lot more governance content coming here in the future. So just make sure to follow that. And anyway, guys, we appreciate you. Peace out.